Um, Ari, let me begin at a somewhat personal level. Since we all last talked, Israelis have passed the 1 year anniversary of October 7. They witnessed the swift and efficient elimination of Hezbollah leadership. They've weathered an Iranian missile attack, and they've watched the start of a ground war in Lebanon. That's all in very recent history. Great success in some respects, and yet war on every front. Can you just take a brief moment at the top to reflect on what all of this means and where Israel is today?
Sure. I think what has happened since we last talked is it cannot be, the importance of it cannot be overstated. The war was totally redefined. What we saw in September, and again, we'll elaborate probably later, is the great Israeli comeback. I mean, after being so passive, traumatized, bewildered, confused for nearly a year, Israel, within 10 remarkable days in September, regained its confidence, took the initiative, proved to our neighbors how powerful it is, and began to regaining what is most important in the Middle East, which is deterrence. We lost deterrence on October 7th, and we began regaining deterrence in September 2024. So the one element is the Israeli comeback. The second element, which is the other side of it, is the beginning of the weakening of the Iranian Shiite axis. And I'm sure we'll be talking about it, but in a sentence, for 40 years, Iran, with few gaps here and there, Iran was on the march, definitely in the last 15 years, 10 years, 5 years, and suddenly we have an opportunity of a beginning of a change, of a turnaround. But while this is the good news, the problem, as you referred to, is that we find ourselves in what we didn't want, which is a multi-front war. I would say at this point, there is confidence now, much more confidence, but there are very high stakes. And I would say there's a great opportunity, but unprecedented risks as well. I mean, it goes together. And I'll take just 2 minutes to describe to you folks an experience. October 1st, you probably watched it on television. I take our 15-year-old son to do some surfing in Tel Aviv. He calls me 2 minutes later. He says, they're closing the beach. I said, we go back within an hour. The city disappears. Tel Aviv, which is such a vital city, like vanishes. People are gone. We come home. There's all this. By now, we know that the Iranian attack is on its way. The sirens go. Our cell phones are taken over by the Israeli military, sending us to the shelter. We sit 5 yards from where I sit right now in our shelter, and we hear unprecedented explosions. We live not very far from the Mossad headquarters. They were targeting the Mossad headquarters, and actually real huge ballistic missiles fell not far away. An hour later, we come out, and it's almost as if nothing happened. And I say, what a wild, crazy country we live in. On the one hand, no other democracy experienced an attack of 200 ballistic missiles. And then, and on the way we dealt with this, and then the craziness that we take it for granted. So we live in this peculiar situation. What my conclusion of that night, I said, first of all, I salute Israeli genius, the engineers of Arrow and Iron Dome and all that. Second, I salute Israeli resilience. The way this society dealt in such a disciplined, like British-like way with such an attack was astonishing. But I also salute God. We were really lucky that night. It could have been very different. And in the coming days and in the coming weeks, we will see this drama intensifying. And probably this is what we would like to talk about. Wow, this is a huge one. So if I may, me being me, please let me give the context of it. And I think the context is very, very important. First of all, people who are on our friends on this Zoom since last October have heard me saying time after time, it's Iran. The source of evil, the source of the problem, it's Iran. The war, to begin with, was not Hamas. The issue was Iran. The problem was that most people in Israel and abroad did not notice it, did not understand it. Now it's in our face. So please let me say something about Iran. The Middle East was shaped in 1979. Two major events, there were some other events, by the way, but two major events in 1979, actually both had to do with an American president who just celebrated his 100th birthday. The peace agreement with Egypt, which Jimmy Carter brokered, and the Iranian Revolution, which Jimmy Carter failed in dealing with. Ever since, the Middle East is basically about these two historic trends: the process of moderation, a pro-Western alliance, not democracy, but people wanting stability and prosperity, and the radical Iranian-led process, which creates chaos and terror everywhere in the Middle East. Basically, the Iranians have three goals. They want to destroy the Jewish state, to enslave the Arab world, and to challenge the West. That's their goal, and they're serious about it. This is what people did not understand. These are people who are, on the one hand, pragmatic chess players, but on the other hand, they have a messianic, crazy agenda, and they mean it. It's not just talk, they meant it. So basically, what do we have now? That process, I won't talk about the 40 years, but the last 10, 15 years, Israel noticed the Iranian nuclear, or defined the Iranian nuclear issue as the main challenge 15 years ago, under the leadership of Netanyahu and Barak, who were at the time working together, something difficult to imagine today. And the debate with America for 15 years was that Israel said, if you want to stop Iran, you need a credible military option. Credible military option was the main term. And there was an argument whether you want to use it or not, but Israelis said all the time, if you want to stop the Iranians, there's one thing they'll understand. If they know they'll be stopped by force, if they try to break out, they'll be stopped. All the other sanctions, all the others that are nice, they won't help. And the Americans were ambivalent about it. Some of them got it, some didn't, but it was never endorsed. You remember gazillion discussions about it throughout different administrations. Suddenly, this issue is on the table in an immediate way because Israel probably has some element of a credible military option. We'll talk about what's the implications that may be used, some say probably be used, within days or weeks. So we have a process within the 40-year process, we have a 15-year process coming to a kind of climax. Now, probably Israel will not use the great military option, but we will have a military confrontation with Iran, which is unprecedented. We did something in the past. We never had something so important. So that's one element. The second element has to do with what you asked about, Nicole, and what I talked about, which is this turnaround of the war, because there is a kind of question. What do you do? Okay, so Israel has the initiative. Israel has more strength. Do we use the momentum and go all the way in order to defeat our enemies? Or do we understand there is a limit to what you can do with power, and you try to project power, you attack them, you weaken them, but you understand that you want, at the end of the day, to end the war and to have some political arrangement. This is the great dilemma. No one knows what's in Netanyahu's head right now. But in the sense, this issue is not only relevant to Israelis. Well, throughout the year, we talked about it, that this war is not about only Israel and the Jews. It's relevant to the free world. And sadly, the free world didn't understand it. This issue now may have major effect on your elections. Because for years, the suspicion regarding Netanyahu, and I'm not saying whether justified or not, that he will be tempted to try to pull America into the war against Iran. That's what some people in the Obama administration were afraid of, some others throughout the year. Now there is a situation where if Israel strikes in a very assertive way, and if Iran does the ballistic missile attack that I just described, but twice as big, America may be forced to go into war. So the dilemma here is an Israeli dilemma, which is what I just described. Do you just retaliate for the aggressive, unacceptable Iranian attack and show how strong you are and deter the neighborhood and move forward with Gaza and Lebanon? Or do you try to use this opportunity in order to really weaken the regime in Tehran and to potentially stop the nuclear project? Specifically, the dilemma has to do with four different options. There is the nuclear option, there is the oil option, energy option, there is the regime option, and then there is the military option. I'll say my opinion. I don't know what they will choose. I say going for the nuclear is very problematic unless we have the capability to set the clock back 5 years. If I would be told by the commander of the Air Force, that we can destroy the damage will cause the nuclear project in Iran will be such that will buy 5 years, I would say that may be worth the risk, because in 5 years, with the way they are, the regime may change, things may happen, it may be worth it. But if we can only scratch the nuclear project, then the risk is very high, because you give legitimacy to the Iranian actually to do their nuclear rate. So if you cannot actually kill the beast, wounding the beast lightly may be very dangerous. The oil issue, I think, is very dangerous because of the implications in America, because that may create an energy crisis. It's true that we are not in the 1970s and the Saudis will be very happy to provide oil. It's not, history doesn't repeat itself. But if Israel will be perceived as the one igniting an energy crisis, and so to speak, the Middle East in flames and the world economy affected a week or two before the American elections, that's high risk. That's very high risk. Regime, I think many Israelis, after we killed Hania, we killed Nasrallah, we killed so many people, and we should have. By the way, it's a good thing in the Middle East when the bullies attack you in such a way, fighting back and killing the bad guys without killing civilians is a good idea. But the going for Khamenei will be far too dangerous in my mind, because Iran, although I personally think it's semi-Nazi state, but it's still a state. It's not a terror organization. You don't do such thing. And also, Khamenei is the only one who can stop the escalation. If he's gone, you may find yourself in a very chaotic situation. But going for many of his generals and leaders may be a good idea. The fourth option, which I definitely totally support, is going for the military infrastructure, and especially if we can limit their ability to fire rockets at us. Because if we will be able, like when you, in the American war plans, wherever, you begin by destroying the Air Force and anti-aircraft, okay? So they cannot hurt you. I think that if we can show our ability by crippling Iranian military capability to attack us, then all options are open for the future, and we will do something that is totally legitimate, that no one except for the people or anyhow anti-Israel, no one reasonable would say that it was illegitimate. So these are the four options. I'll dare say something that usually I don't like to give short-term prophecies. It's a stupid thing, but you are my friends, I'll do it. I think if this happens, something may stop it, but it seems likely that it will happen. The Beeper operation will be pale compared to it. I mean, Israel has extraordinary capabilities, And I think it's really a good idea to demonstrate how strong, where we are strong, after we seem to be weak where we are weak. So first of all, one of the main dilemmas of the day is that we really are in a process of reassessing where we are. Because basically what happened, that our weakest enemy, Hamas, proved to be much stronger than we thought, tragically. And our strongest enemy, Hezbollah, proved to be more vulnerable than we thought. And the question all around is, what's a real tiger and what's a paper tiger? I remember many, many years ago when Benjamin Netanyahu was still enjoyed having in-depth conversations with me. And one of the conversations was just about that. And he said at the time, this is some years ago, that in some aspects, Iran is a paper tiger, but it may have nuclear teeth. And once it has nuclear teeth, it's a real tiger. And I think that was a pretty sober and realistic observation. So we, in a sense, again, on the one hand, there is an amazing opportunity, but there is also a great danger, because fundamentally, Iran is a regional power. It has an imperial past, it has imperial inspirations, it has some imperial skills. And although they were so sophisticated, and we were so blind to see how sophisticated they were, and now, after the successes of Israel, there is a tendency to think there is nothing there, and we can do anything. And that may be dangerous. I'll say just in a sentence, we made two such mistakes of underestimating our enemies, or this underestimating the situation, not only our enemies. One was in 1956, we had a great military victory in the Sinai, but we didn't understand the new world. We went with Britain and France, that were the old colonial powers, and basically the Americans and Russians said to us, guys, you stepped out of line, go back. And the entire campaign was like wasted. The second example, which is more disturbing for me, is in 1970. Thanks to Henry Kissinger and Yitzhak Rabin and Golda Meir, we had suddenly a lot of first-class American technology that we didn't have before. We had the military edge, and we bombed in Egypt, near Cairo, and the result was that the Soviets stepped in and helped the Egyptians in an unprecedented way, which caused us a lot of trouble in the 1973 Yom Kippur War. So it's a very delicate game, because we must use force, we must project force, we must retaliate, and we must use the opportunity to weaken Iran. And perhaps later on, I'll say what's my general belief of what we should be doing. But on the other hand, we should not get into a state of euphoria and hubris. We did it in the past. We don't want to repeat that. So I really hope we'll have a kind of calculated, assertive action regarding our neighbors. I'm a great believer in the American Arab-Israeli alliance. I think the potential is there. We've seen the beginnings of it in many elements. There is much more that can be done. But sadly, our neighbors will not take a chance. They always hedge. If they are our allies, at the same time, they invest 20, 30% of their capital with the other side. They are very cautious because they are vulnerable, because they don't have legitimacy, because they are not democracies. So on the one hand, I'll do the utmost to have the Arabs as part of the coalition. But on the other hand, I wouldn't expect them to really stand by us when push comes to shove. And the alliance, or the shared interests, can be used in a reasonable, cautious way. But militarily speaking, we are alone, probably with American assistance. I don't know if I ever said it before, but for those of you who are fed by my dear colleagues in Haaretz, assume that Israeli public opinion is in exactly the opposite corner, okay? So Israel was never so united. Israelis are traumatized on the one hand, but then they are and they're traumatized, they are terrified. But now there is a striking the swift change from a sense of almost impotence to a sense of omnipotence is everywhere. I'll say again, I'm somewhat troubled by this. I think this is the time that you sometimes make mistakes. But people are absolutely, look, we'll talk about Lebanon later, but the leader of the Labour Party, who's the most left-wing leader among the 7 potential leaders of Israel, went on television 2 weeks ago and said how Israeli forces should be spread all over southern Lebanon, which is what the old world used to call occupation. Okay, this is the Yair Golan, who's representing the Zionist left. So Israelis are in a different. No, we have no illusions about Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran. By the way, we didn't have much illusions before, but this terrible, traumatic, painful year brought it home. We understood that it's for real, it's right here, it's in our homes. So people are very much determined to have a strike in Iran and to be assertive. I actually am somewhat worried again that we will not be carried, on these waves of. I mean, I love the determination, but I think we still have to be reasonable and to calculate in a very rational manner. Look, if there is some totally crazy action, people will not be enthusiastic. Here, people feel we must act, and we must act in a very assertive manner. And between us, much of the discourse is why America doesn't get it. A lot of the discussion in Israel is pretty much united, and people keep asking, why do our friends don't understand what is so self-evident for all of us? So listen, all the amazing success, this September turnaround. I suppose some of you are just aware of it. Almost happened by mistake. Okay, so it wasn't that there was a very serious strategic discussion in cabinet and they changed. God was on our side in this sense. It was like, and then when there was success, then they went further and further. I mean, if you ask about Bibi, I'll say something about Bibi. Bibi is, for better and for worse, really for better and for worse, is risk averse. He never liked to enjoy. There was never a rumble in it. He never, for several reasons. So one of the reasons Israel was passive in a way for quite a number of months in 2024 was his concern about the military and taking the initiative. Once it happened and he saw success, I think that like almost everybody was shocked by the success. It was one thing after the other. So that created that kind of change. So I'm not sure, I'm being polite, that there is a strategy. I'm not sure there is a strategy, but let's try, if I may, for a sentence, to try to understand the gap. Why was Israel so incompetent with Hamas in Gaza and so successful in Lebanon? One reason is that this is the war we prepared for. For 15 years, the Israeli military, Air Force, Mossad, intelligence were preparing for the war with Hezbollah. We didn't prepare for the war with Gaza. So what you see now is the outcome of doing your homework. When I think it's general in life, but it's true for Israelis. When we are focused, when we see a challenge and we are focused, we are amazing. We are superheroes. But we have blind spots, and trouble happens in our blind spots. And Gaza and Hamas were one huge blind spot, and this is partly of one of the reasons of the gap. The second element is that both Iran and Lebanon are semi-open societies that people can fly in and out, and corrupt societies. It's much easier to gather information. in Iran and in Lebanon than in Gaza, which is one pressure cooler even before the war. The third element is the fact there is a difference, I'm not sure it's interesting for all of you, between two intelligence organizations. The Shabak, which was responsible for Gaza, failed, and the Mossad, which was responsible for Lebanon, did, extraordinary work. I mean, the work that was done there will be studied for decades, And the fourth element is taking the initiative. When we were surprised, we were out of balance, we saw the results. Here, we took the initiative, and Israel always needs to take the initiative because then we can gather our forces and have the impact that we have. The problem now is that, regarding the air campaign and the intelligence, it's a total success. It's extraordinary success. The problem, of course, is with the ground operation. I don't have to tell Americans about the dangers of boots on the ground. I don't have to tell you about Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan. The Israeli experience is the first Lebanon war and the second Lebanon war. So you don't want to be dragged into that. Right now, the idea is a limited military operation. So far, except for one or two tragic incidents, it's going rather well. But talking of strategy, that will not solve the Lebanese problem. So we need to do that operation for three reasons. One, we have to give security for the people of the Galilee who live by the border. Second, we have to show, again, kind of deterrence to the Lebanese who cooperated with Hezbollah in such a way. We have to prevent an October 7th scenario in the north. And this is why the limited operation is justified. But the moment it ends, if it's not limited, we will sink into a Lebanon war. If it is limited, when it ends and we go back, the problem was not totally solved. We improved our situation, but it's not solved. What I don't understand is why, at this point, there isn't a diplomatic political campaign accompanying this war in Lebanon. Because the slogan, Israel, and we discussed it in the past regarding our problems in Gaza, we should not make the war about us, and we should not make it about just Hamas or Hezbollah. In my mind, there should be three slogans here. Free Lebanon from Hezbollah, free the Palestinians from Hamas, and free the Iranians from the Ayatollahs. This is what it should be about, not about just the Jewish thing or the Israeli thing. And there is a UN resolution 1559 taken years ago, called for the dismantling of the militias, namely Hezbollah. It was never implemented. There should be now an international campaign using the Israeli military success to put pressure on the international community and on the Lebanese government to implement Resolution 1559. It's just, it's reasonable, it will help free the Lebanese. Now, I'm not naive. It's not that tomorrow the Lebanese government is strong enough to implement it. But we should begin a general move that is diplomatic, that is political, that is historic, and not just have facts on the grounds of military success. We've seen this, and when we talk about Gaza, we've seen this failure in transforming military success into political achievements in the past, and it's happening again. And again, we see astonishing tactical success with no clear strategy. I'll get to the painful issue of the hostages in a second, but I'll try to recap, if I may. I think that what we've seen, a year getting into the second year of the war, is considerable military success after the trauma, after the passivity and confusion in the beginning. The military success is that we basically broke down the military structure of Hamas. So there are no Hamas regiments. There aren't the kind of forces that attacked the kibbutzim on October 7th. And if you compare and by the way, the Israeli military learned from the lesson. If you compare it to Ukraine and Mosul, which are the two relevant examples in different ways, the Israeli military at the end of the day did rather well with all the human suffering and pain all around, which we obviously understand. But there is a kind of military success, and some other conversation we can discuss what happened. The total problem is the total failure is a political, because Hamas is as politically strong today as it was before. All the aid going into Gaza is distributed by Hamas people. So their influence, their power over their citizens or the residents of Gaza was not decreased. One of the main reasons for that is that there was no Israeli strategy. What we should have done 6-7 months ago is to create a political alternative to Hamas. And that is possible. Perhaps we'll discuss it. But without that, if you just destroy the infrastructure and with all the destruction of Gaza, I said to you, I think in one of the previous conversation, I said, if you have to do Dresden, you need an Adenauer. You need an horizon of where you are going to justify it and to actually not only for public opinion, but also for the people of the country, because the war against terror is the war to release the people who are terrorized by the terrorists. And sadly, there is no concept whatsoever so far. Now, I'll share with you what I think is happening. I think there are two different ideas. The extremists in Israel in Gaza, we have, in my mind, a loony right element in our cabinet that has, in my mind, very, very, very dangerous ideas regarding the future of Gaza. As far as I know, Bibi's approach is different. What Netanyahu would like to do, as far as I know, and I think I know, he would love to hand over Gaza to the Arab neighbors, UAE mainly, and some others. The main problem and the difference between him and the center is that he insists that there will not be a PA component. He's obsessed. He says, no Hamas, no Abbas. So it takes time, if it's possible at all, to have a legitimate Palestinian component. No Arabs will come into Gaza as long as there is fighting and as long as there is no legitimacy. They have to be invited by a Palestinian body. In order to do that, you need a PA or some other Palestinian, you need some entity that is not Hamas, is not the dangerous part of the PA, but is a legitimate Palestinian entity. That, I think that either there was a failure in producing that, or because of the political concerns and the fear of the extremists. This is an issue that can divide this government, okay? This is where Netanyahu's approach and Smotrich and Ben-Gvir are not on the same page. And the outcome is what we see, which is, as I said, military success, political failure, and the growing danger of a kind of Somalia at the south. So we got rid of one danger, not totally, but the old Hamas terror danger is suspended or limited, not totally gone. But the growing danger of a Somalia at our border is apparent. So the need for strategy and the need for a political dimension of the war is so clear, and sadly, it's not happening so far. And this connects with, of course, with the hostages, because definitely the extreme right is not willing to pay the price for a deal. Now, I'm not naive, and I'm not of the people who blame the government for not bringing the hostages. The person who is to be blamed is Yahya Sinwar and his fascist Nazi friends, okay? They are the guilty ones. They are the villains. But I think we should have had, the way this was dealt with was not the most effective. There was some opportunities at certain point. We saw the deal in November that it worked. I think a lot of more pressure should have been put on Qatar a long time ago. I think there were many other things that should have been done. At the end of the day, I'll connect it with other issues we discussed. The hostages will not be back without a powerful Israel. You need a powerful, generous Israel, a powerful, humane Israel. So the fact that we are perceived as as stronger is a good thing all around, but it's also good for the hostages. But you have to combine it with the generosity, with the humane element, with the understanding that what collapsed on October 7th is not only Israeli deterrence, which we are rebuilding, but Israeli solidarity. The state has betrayed its citizens. And therefore, beyond the human need and the awareness of the incredible suffering of these young men and women, not all young, most are young, there is a need in order to heal the wounds of Israeli society. We must do the utmost. And sadly, I share with you the notion that right now it's not in the card. It's not at the center stage. Bibi King is back. Okay, so what happened here is like mind-boggling. And by the way, I'll admit that usually I think my forecasts are rather accurate. On this, I really didn't think that after October 7th he can recover. He recovered in an extraordinary way. Why did he recover? One, he showed a kind of he stuck to the cause. He used this term that many people mocked, absolute victory. It seemed ridiculous 6 months ago, and now after this turnaround in September, suddenly there was a feeling. Okay, he was patient. He was willing to stick it out, and now we see the outcome. Now again, we are in mid-story. We don't know what will happen in the coming year. We don't know what will happen in the coming week. But right now, if you ask people today, Sunday, October 13th, Bibi is perceived as much more powerful. I mean, half of the people, a third, I wouldn't say they forgive him or they forgot his responsibility for October 7th and everything before, but he's perceived as much stronger. This is in public opinion, and many of his supporters say, you see, he's a strategic genius. He just waited, everything turned out right, and we are doing well. The second element is that he just enlarged his coalition. He managed to get Gideon Saar, who was a right-wing person, but who opposed him very much. So his coalition is now 68 of 120, and it'll be difficult to dismantle. Again, it's Israel, anything can happen, but right now his coalition seems solid. And look, still most of the people are still against him, but he was like a dead man walking politically, and now he's very much alive, and the chances that he'll be able to stay for a year or two are quite high. One of the reasons for that is the complete failure of the Israeli protest movement, which was and is obsessed. And I think I said it to you, and perhaps it calls for a different conversation. It's time the Israeli center-left brings a vision, a leadership and a vision and a positive ethos. The obsession with what we call Rak Lo Bibi, just not Bibi, doesn't work. It's negative, it's toxic, it's unpleasant. You win with love and hope and promise and joy. You don't win with a negative ethos. I had a podcast that went viral here a few weeks ago in which I described the conversation I had with Daniel, our 15-year-old son, who did not grow up in a Likud household. And when we saw a sign on the highway saying, Bibi is guilty, he's responsible, he's guilty, he said, Daddy, I feel like voting Bibi. There are things you don't do in war. So there was such an opening here, such an opportunity for the Israeli center-left to reinvent itself, to be patriotic, to be unified, and in the process to get rid of Bibi. They did exactly the opposite, and the outcome is that the old identity politics, the combination of his cunning politics with the failure of his opponents, with the changes of the strategic situation, create right now a very strong Bibi. So look, that was the idea of a Bibi Gantz government, release him from being hostage of Ben-Gvir and Smotrich. Sadly, this didn't work. That's a long story. I won't get into the details. In my mind, Bibi acted I'm very critical of the way he acted. Okay, he wanted unity when he was very, very weak. The moment he got a bit stronger, he was not willing to pay any price for unity. And Gantz and Eisenkot found themselves in an impossible situation. But right now, the way reality works, Napoleon talked about lucky generals. Right now, Bibi is a lucky general. I mean, no one a year ago would have imagined that after being responsible for the worst catastrophe in modern Jewish history, the worst massacre since the Holocaust, the greatest failure since Israel was established, the prime minister responsible for all of that would be perceived by half of the population as a hero. That's an incredible political achievement of his and an incredible evidence of the total political, intellectual incompetence of his opponents. So this is a mine that I have to be careful, a few weeks before your elections, although Biden is not running. I'll say it cautiously because, again, I've said it in our previous Zooms. I think the 2023 Biden was quite amazing. And the aircraft carriers, I think and the support for Israel in many ways, I think he had a major role in preventing a regional war, which would have been extremely dangerous. And unlike the success we have today, we should not make a mistake. Had there been a regional war last October, there would have been a catastrophe, okay? And Biden always, I think, should get credit for that. 2024, it all went downhill. So I'm not getting, because of the sensitivities, I won't get of my understanding of the mistakes, but the relationship became totally dysfunctional. And talking of what just I said before, Bibi is actually became Biden in a sense, or the administration in a sense, unintentionally strengthened Netanyahu because they kept criticizing him, but then doing what he wants. And that created a feeling in Israel that here we have a leader who can deal with, and basically the people on the right say to the people on the left, you see, you are so concerned about America, but Bibi gets away with everything. So that actually, I'll say that, perhaps later on, I'll say something about my vision of how it should have worked and what should still be done. I'll connect it with the issue of the day. I think that what we are faced with really calls for an intimate relationship. I'm grateful every day for first of all, for America's leadership in the world, and for America's friendship and support of Israel. I can tell you that on some podcasts, an American podcast that I was on a week ago, and I talked about the relationship with the great American democracy and the Israeli frontier democracy. And people told me, we're not sure it's great. So I said, you have your problems, but for me, America is great. And I never forget for a day what America gave this world, definitely in the last 8 years. And I'm a great believer in America with all the flaws and with all the problems you have, which I'm very much aware of. And I'm worried about the fact that too many Israelis take that support for granted. And specifically about Netanyahu, here you have a person who, when there was the conflict between President Obama and Prime Minister Netanyahu, I said both have the delusion that Netanyahu is the real leader of the GOP. And to an extent, I think it's still true today. Bibi is so, he understands America, or definitely old America, better than any other Israeli and than others. But he uses it in order to intervene in your politics and to get into your system in a way that I find unacceptable and dangerous. And I think we are paying a very high price for that. So I really hope we'll find sanity on this issue as well, that we'll have Israelis who can stand up and sometimes say no to America, because sometimes we understand things that people in Washington don't quite understand. But on the other hand, be grateful, keep the alliance as it should be, keep the intimacy in the relationship. And sadly, this is not what happened. It's happening, by the way, between the military establishments. It's not happening between the White House and Netanyahu's government. So it works the other way around as well. As furious as they are at him, then they find themselves in a situation where they must help, okay? And this is exactly, and I think it's the wrong way to run a relationship, an intimate relationship. I may say something about it soon, but I'll try to answer, to refer to what you asked in a kind of general way. I think, look, I'm a great believer in this alliance. I believe in the shared values. I believe in the shared interests. But I also think that what we see now, there is a potential amazing synergy. Obviously, you have things we don't have. That goes without saying. There are many things we don't have. But there are some things we have which you don't have, or your folks in Washington don't have. So we have sometimes technology, which is outstanding, that it's even better than American. But even more than that, we have an understanding of the region, and we have a spirit of resilience and initiative that I think is sometimes called for. So the need for an alliance between Washington and Jerusalem is not only abstract. I think it can be an amazing business partnership. Now, in many ways it is, but the dysfunctional level of it gets in the way, and I think we should really work on building up this combination of shared values, shared interests, and strategic synergy. It follows directly your previous question. So I'll take just a minute to say what I've been doing in the last year with my small foundation is I've wrote a major strategic paper published as a book called Existential War, which tries to give Israel a national strategy. It was very well received here, endorsed by Gantz, Bennett, Herzog, you name it, and it has quite an impact on thinking here. And then I wanted to begin to do the American part of it, American strategy, which just goes to what you were talking about. So if I have to summarize, and this essay in Foreign Affairs was the kind of beginning of trying to build an American-Israeli strategy. So I think that we can connect now a lot of the dots of what we've discussed in the last hour. The first thing to understand, it's Iran stupid. Iran. Nuclear Iran must be stopped. Conventional Iran must be stopped with its sophisticated weapons, and the terror ring that Iran must be stopped. Iran is too big for Israel, which you asked about it several times. It's too big. We are great, we're amazing, too big for us. Definitely when they're supported by the Russians and the Chinese. Therefore, we need to work together. And the translation that I suggest in my piece of what you just asked about, I call for a kind of new Atlantic charter or a democratic charter between Israel and America, or between America and Israel, that will have basically three goals: removing the Iranian threat to the Middle East and to the world, to Israel, to the Middle East, and to the world. Regional peace, that's number two. And number three, a realistic, creative approach to the Palestinian issue. I think that we really need that American, Arab, Israeli alliance, which has to be part of a wider alliance that will include India and Australia and Japan and all like-minded nations. Why? Because October 2023 proved to us how dangerous Iran is. It's a real attack on our civilization, and it's a real attack on the free world. We talked about it in the past. September 2024 proved that Iran is still vulnerable, and it's not too late. We can do things with sophistication and determination. You can defeat it, or you can stop it and eventually defeat it. So what I claim in my piece that Ukraine was the first eruption of the Second Cold War. Be'eri and Gaza were the second eruption. And if we are to stop the third eruption, which may be a nuclear Iran or some other event, we must work together with this alliance, working together to stop Iran and to reshape the Middle East. If I may, I'll refer to three great American presidents, and I think they should inspire us. The first one is FDR with the Atlantic Charter. And by the way, I won't talk about Netanyahu, but Churchill basically gave up the empire in order to get the Atlantic Charter. But FDR stood by Britain, I'm talking before Pearl Harbor, understanding what's at stake. But the two that are not as heroic is basically what Reagan did vis-a-vis the USSR in 1980s. He didn't send the Marines to Moscow, but he developed a policy that increased the pressure on the Soviet Union and speeded up its disintegration. And the other president and his foreign minister is George Bush Sr. and James Baker. Israel, America, the Middle East, we really need a new James Baker. What they did in 1990, between August 1990 and January 91, in building military power, building a coalition that fought Saddam Hussein in order to save the Middle East and protect the international financial system. That was the issue. Iran is far more dangerous than Saddam Hussein. So I think that we need a kind of FDR, Reagan, James Baker approach in order to cement the alliance between America and Israel within a larger context of supporting the free, of protecting the free world and facing up to the two great dangers, which one is the radical extremism, the people with 11th century values who have 21st century capabilities, and two, the access of China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea, which is trying to destabilize world order. The story of Israel, that it's full of great people, but very few of them are in government. So I think there are many things. People are thinking along these lines. I think, look, my book had incredible impact on all this leadership, including the IDF leadership, the Mossad leadership, because I was able, my goal was to write a kind of long telegram that defines the issue and offers a strategy. And I was shocked and very much impressed and happy to see the reaction that so many people from the right, from the center, who endorsed it, because they didn't quite have the words and the concept. They didn't have the clarity. But I think that generally people understand that. Netanyahu is another issue. I think he's a very smart man with a lot of problems. So I don't know if you want to discuss it now, but definitely there are few thinkers in this cabinet, and the ones who do think in very extreme terms, and they are part of the problem, not the part of the solution. Look, I think that if there was a proper relationship, they could have struck a deal where they promise him to do a lot of stuff on November 10th and 15th and ask him to wait. But I find it hard to believe there is enough confidence. Again, look, there's a very good relationship between Gallant and Austin. I think there is a reasonable relationship between Ron Dermer and Jake Sullivan. I mean, it's not totally dysfunctional, but fundamentally, as Bob Woodward writes, it's a dysfunctional relationship. Okay, again, so I must say, because I care so much about the American-Israeli relationship, I'm very nervous about the implications of a dramatic Israeli move that becomes a major political issue in America. I don't like it. I don't like it. But I must say that it's not artificial. In this sense, it's not that Bibi invented it. I mean, reality, the drama unfolded in this way. We are faced with this issue, and there's a limit to how much we can wait here because the neighborhood is watching. And again, Iran violated our sovereignty in such astonishing way that we have to react. So, talking of better times or better, if there was an understanding of postponing to November, but being sure that America will be there with us in a much more impressive way, that would have been perfect. Between us, all of us, I think that November, December are a critical period anyhow, because I think all players throughout the Middle East are waiting for elections. I think that some in Washington are waiting for that. And whether the Iranian issue, the Saudi issue, I think there is going to be a lot of pressure on trying to do significant, even historical things in November, December. So should we pass these coming weeks without something cataclysmic happening, I think that November, December may be a very interesting period of time. I'll refer for a moment to my piece in Foreign Affairs. One of the things that moved me, that really made me very happy, was not only that so many people sent it to the Democratic leadership and Republican leadership and the White House and the State Department, but that so many Arab leaders reacted so positively to what I wrote. So I think you are not, on this issue, you are not naive at all, Nicole. I don't think you are that naive on other issues as well. But the deeper the conflict with Iran is, the closer Israel and the Arabs are. This is sometimes people find it's the Middle East. It's complicated. And the Abraham Accords were achieved because the moderate Arabs loved Israel standing against Iran. That doesn't mean they'll send their F-35s or F-15s to be with us in that war. But they are terrified of Iran. Look, the entire region is terrified of Iran and the radical jihad. And this is what people in the Middle East don't care. I mean, the only people who care about the Palestinian issue is the Israeli left and Americans. The Arabs don't care about it. They don't mind much other issues. Everybody, on the one hand, the great good thing that happened in the Middle East is Arab modernity. MBZ is like my hero. By the way, Salam Fayyad on the Palestinian issue. That's the good news. But we're all terrified of the Iranian beast. And now this is coming to a moment of truth, because there is a real chance, no one planned it, there is a real chance of, if not defeating it, at least weakening it in a dramatic way. So if we play the right cards, and again, going back to kind of the FDR thing or the James Baker thing, choose what you want, there is an amazing opportunity. There is not only dramatic danger, there is also a real amazing opportunity. So I think peace with Saudi Arabia is very much there. And if we play our cards right regarding Iran, I think that can be reached rather soon. There is a specific issue of the action Israel must take, and there's no other way right now. But if I may, because we talked a bit about the different options, if I may enlarge the scope of it, and I'll say here something somewhat extreme and then something somewhat moderate. In my mind, the long-term objective of this war has to be regime change in Tehran. Nothing else will free the Middle East. We cannot do an Israeli-Palestinian peace or even understanding. Israel cannot withdraw from anywhere. We cannot do anything with occupation. We can do anything as long as there is the Iranian threat hovering above us. But it's much worse than that, because Iran, as I said, Iran is a combination of two elements. And I hate repeating myself, but please let me, I think it's justified. What we saw on October 7th is medieval people acquiring 21st century technology. There was such an event before. It was called 9/11. It happened in your town. But if Iran goes nuclear, you will have medieval people with nuclear bombs. That will change everything. That will change everything. Now, there are two implications to that. One is that you'll have crazy people with nuclear bombs. You don't know what will happen. Two, the moment Iran goes nuclear, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Algeria, Turkey will go nuclear. You'll have a multipolar nuclear system in the Middle East. It won't be like the Cold War. It won't be like the Soviets and Americans. So we need, that's the thing. That was the writing on the wall for 20 years. And now we are faced with the combination, the drama, that on one hand, the danger is so clear, they're so close, and with all the turmoil, they might try to break out or into the bomb. And on the other, there is an astonishing opportunity to stop them. So the way I see it, the long-term goal should be regime change. I think the potential is there because most Iranians cannot stand. As I said, the slogan should be free all these people, free the Arabs, free the Palestinians, free the Iranians from extremism. We won't have democracy, and it won't be Denmark, okay? But we can have let's have more united UAEs around. I mean, that's possible. That should be the goal. So if the long-term goal, you have to be very cautious in dealing it, because these are, even when they are weaker, they're sophisticated and they are dangerous and they are a serious nation. It's not Libya, and it's not the deserts of where ISIS was running around with their trucks. So this calls for a real global coalition from Vancouver to Tokyo. I mean, we have to take all the forces, and this is why we need American leadership. Guys, it's all up to you, not only you, but America must lead. And I think that if the events of the last year will be a wake-up call for America, we know it from previous events. America is an amazing giant, but it takes it time to wake up. And we don't want a nuclear Pearl Harbor for you to wake up. And so the need for American leadership, because all the ingredients are there to build a coalition. The more people in the West understand it, all the moderate Arabs understand it. I think the Indians understand it very well. Let's build this grand coalition. Now, within that grand coalition, if you really have a real economic, political blockade on them, if you develop all the technology, look, all the things that the Russians are doing to you, why don't you do to the Iranians? Put billions of dollars into a major cyber, not only cyber in the sense of finding someone to kill some general, in the fact, bring about the great Iranian rebellion. It's so, the danger is so close and the opportunity is so clear. We just have to connect them. I definitely don't want to discuss American politics here. My attitude to Netanyahu is very clear. I think he's a talented person that has been much too long in power. I think his responsibility for October 7th is very, very clear. That doesn't mean that anything he does is wrong, but I think we must get out. I won't talk about the person, but this syndrome of making the war only about Israel and aggravating half of the Americans and not speaking to the free world, in a world that the free world can identify with. I wrote about it in my piece. We should have been Ukraine too, and rather than that, we almost became Russia too. Okay. So rather than be Zelensky, Bibi is perceived by many people by Putin. Now, I don't think he is, but that's the perception. That's a failure. That's a major failure. Even with all the great military success, winning hearts and minds in America and in Europe is as essential for victory in war as any military operation. And this government, led by Netanyahu, totally failed on that. And we need a totally different approach without getting into the personalities involved. Look, it was implied in what I said about, look, Churchill and Roosevelt meet in August 1941 in Canada, in Nova Scotia, I believe. And basically, it's not written in this way. What the Atlantic Charter says is basically Britain gives up its empire. Churchill understands that without America, he cannot win the war, and he loved the empire. He was an imperialist. Israel has to, because of the concern regarding the Palestinian issue, this is the albatross. Now, I'm not a naive peacenik, and I think we need a complicated, but we have to address the issue. We cannot ignore it. So it has to be, and this I go back to the alliance between the great democracy and the frontier democracy. This war has to be a war about liberty, And in order to do that, we have to show goodwill on the Palestinian issue in a realistic way. So we need a Marshall Plan for Gaza. I think we should really give it to the Emirates, to people, Dakhlan and Salam Fayyad, to rebuild Gaza. We cannot just do the war thing, and we have to deal with the situation altogether. So, but I would ask, Americans to be realistic about the rough neighborhood we live in. And I will ask my fellow Israelis not only to be respectful and grateful to America, but also to go back to our fundamental values as a Jewish democratic nation and not to be seduced by extreme nationalism. In the past, we always knew we are a small nation and hated by many, and that before we use force, we must capture the moral high ground. So in 1947, Ben-Gurion accepts the partition plan of the UN, which was an impossible plan, but it gave us the ability to fight the 48 war and establish Israel. In 1967, Levi Eshkol sends Abba Eban to the White House and the Elysee and Downing 10 in order to ask the international community to protect us from the Egyptian aggression. When they fail to do it, we have the legitimacy to use force, and we triple the size of Israel. We have an amazing victory. Even in 2000, Ehud Barak initiates the summit led by Bill Clinton. We are willing to do peace, the two-state solution, the full deal. And when it is rejected, we had the legitimacy to fight the second intifada. This government never did the work. They never captured the moral high. We should have used the October 7th. I think we military operations began nearly 2 weeks later. We should have used that time to frame the war as a war that is not against the Palestinian people, but against Hamas. We should have given it the Iranian dimension. We should have given it a dimension that I was talking about here, relevant to the free world. We should have sent President Herzog from one capital to another, because he's the best spokesperson we have right now. We should have appointed ambassadors that are attractive and relevant and people can identify. We did nothing. We ran a kind of heavy-handed military campaign. And by the way, we did the military thing eventually proved to be quite successful. But it's one dimension of war, and definitely when this is the issue. So in many ways, we played into the hands of our enemies, and that was the mistake of the previous war, of previous year. I hope that in this new second year of the war, and I'm so sad for saying that, we'll have the wisdom to understand that as important as military action is, you need a political context, a diplomatic context, and a moral context. By the way, we need it also within Israel. We need more legitimacy, more unity, a cohesive society. Our young men and women are asked to risk their lives. People who are on reserve duty, who are 28, 30, they have a life they don't have a life anymore. They spend half the time fighting. And so we need building international legitimacy and internal legitimacy, and giving the war a moral dimension is essential. And I think the moral dimension is there. We don't invent it or fake it. It's there. We have to find a way of giving it the right narrative, something I try to do the best in doing during this conversation.